All right, guys, and welcome back to class. Today, we are going to be analyzing Chapter 9. So by this point, everyone should have been read up or have read up to the end of Chapter 9. We're going to summarize an action or an incident that has taken place. So reread pages 221 through 222, from by noon to his wife. And I want you to ask yourself, what does Paul do once he realizes the French soldier is dead? Why does Paul do this? Summarize this action in your own words and share out in a discussion board. For this lesson, our focusing question task is, how do texts inspired by the World War I illuminate attitudes towards the war? And our content framing question is, what does a deeper exploration of the incident in the shell hole reveal in the novel and its film adaptation? And lesson craft question for lesson 25 is, in our experiment stage, how does a conclusion work? So once you've read that portion that I just asked you all to read, 221 to 222, ask yourself, what does this reveal about Paul? What does this show you about his personality or who he is as a person? Here he says, "Comrade, I did not want to kill you. If you jumped in here again, I would not do it. If you would be sensible too. But you were only an idea to me before, an abstraction that lived in my mind and called forth its appropriate response. It was that abstraction I stabbed." Page 223. I want you guys to use the outside-in strategy and see if you can figure out what the word abstraction means. Look outside or inside the word to see if there are any ways that we can determine what Paul means when he says that it was the abstraction I stabbed, or you were only an idea to me before, an abstraction that lived in my mind. How can we tell what the word means? By looking around the word. Okay? Now I want you guys to read aloud pages 226 to 229 of the novel. From now suddenly I begin to tremble to Olaf's rifle cracks out and sharply and dry. There will be a series of questions in which I want you to answer in regards to these pages. You'll find them inside of the discussion board. Explain Paul's statement. I think no more of the dead. He is of no consequence to me now. How is this statement developed in the last scene when Paul leaves the shell hole and rejoins his friends? Why does Kat tell Paul it's very good for Paul to look at the snipers right now? And explain the significance of the last two paragraphs in Chapter 9, from "it was only" to "and dry." What do they reveal about the novel's attitude towards war and its effects? Now we're going to complete our focusing question task. It's going to be done based off of Chapter 9 and the film Forgive Me, Comrade. Here, for handout 25A, I want you to do a film analysis of the film first. It's going to ask you to watch the film and to summarize what is happening in the scene, and to consider the setting and the relationship between Paul and the soldiers, and all of that to give you an idea of what's happening in that film. And then you're going to use that information that you have to answer your focusing question task. Make sure that you have read Chapter 9 in order to complete, and also review over lighting and action sections of handout 21A and read the descriptions. That way, when you're watching the clip, you should pay particular attention to the choices that the actors make. So our craft question says, in our experiment stage, how does the conclusion work? As a reminder, writing a conclusion should address the so what question. Why is what you're saying and your ideas relevant or important to the reader? This is something that can be placed in your conclusion when you are creating your papers. There will also be a T chart. I want you guys to write big ideas on one side and relevance on another. What big ideas have we recently been discussing in the relation to the novel and film version of All Quiet on the Western Front? So, for example, one of the big ideas is war. And how is this relevant to our audience? Well, you guys are the ones who are reading it. And this was a long time ago from when it comes to your age. So you would probably think that this book doesn't really go with today's times. And that's okay. But you can write that in your relevance section. What is another big idea? Another big idea could be the feeling of isolation, or maybe not having a job when you go to the war. All of these things are big ideas, and there are many more. For homework, I want you guys to reread pages 223 through 225 in preparation for your focusing question task, and annotate your notes for Chapter 1 for the most significant moments and ideas about the war and how it affects humankind or humanity, and continue your fluency work. Our content framing question says, what does a deeper exploration of the incidences in the shell hole reveal in the novel and its film adaptation? What did you notice about the similarities and the differences between the novel and the film versions of the incident in the shell hole? Now let's look at the so what. Sentence starters that you use can be modified with the big address of so what. So here are some sentence stems that can kind of help you create your conclusions in writing. So you could say something like, even though All Quiet on the Western Front was written almost 100 years ago, the novel, and this goes back to what we were discussing here when we said that one of the big ideas was war, but that it was a long time ago and it may not have necessarily been relevant to us today. But if we wanted to write our conclusion, we could say, even though All Quiet on the Western Front was written almost 100 years ago, the novel could possibly still be relevant in some ways. You know, maybe there's something in there that we can still relate to. Or you could say, while some may think war movies are only violent entertainment, what else could they possibly share? That could be here. Or ultimately, All Quiet on the Western Front has much to teach us about, and tell us what other things we could have learned from All Quiet on the Western Front. Not all of it was only about war. Or, in a world in which war is still many people's reality, what can we learn about that? These are sentence starters that can help you create your conclusion. Review your notes from the last several lessons and write a concluding statement using one of the sentence stems or another sentence addressing the so what question. So fill in the blank for one of these sentence stems. Which of these sentence stems is more clear and why? Screaming was heard as Paul entered the front, or Paul heard screaming as he entered the front. Which one is more clear? We're talking about shifts in verb voices. These are written in two different verb voices. Which one is more clearer? So if you look here, sentence 2 is more clear because the sentence 1 contains a shift in the verb voice. We don't necessarily want that. So look at these sentences here, these pairs. Work and identify the appropriate shift in verb voice and the portion of the sentence in passive voice. Why is it important to avoid shifts in verb voice in your writing? Think about what we just said about these two sentences. Why was it important that we read this sentence over this sentence? To end, I want you to complete an exit ticket. You're going to write the sentence that contains the inappropriate shift in verb voice and underlining the passive verb voice in this passage. That's going to be it for today's lesson. If you guys have any help or questions, or need any help or have any questions, please come to office hours. See you soon. Bye.